Chapter 2. Whispers in the Treme, New Orleans. July 1925. The morning sun rose over New Orleans like a reluctant guest, its light muted by a shroud of humidity that clung to the city like a fever dream. Julien Dubois navigated the narrow streets of the Treme, the soles of his polished shoes scuffing against the uneven pavement. The neighborhood buzzed with its own rhythm, children laughing as they chased a stray dog, the clatter of a street vendor's cart, the faint hum of a spiritual sung by an old woman sweeping her stoop. But beneath the surface there was a tension, a whisper of unease that had spread since the body on Bourbon Street. Julien felt it in the sidelong glances of passers-by, in the way doors creaked shut as he approached. The city was watching, waiting, and he didn't like the weight of its gaze. He hadn't slept. The image of the dead girl, her throat torn, the crescent moon symbol carved into her chest, had burned itself into his mind, keeping him up as he pored over old case files in his cramped office above a tailor's shop. He'd found nothing to explain the symbol, nothing to rationalize the lack of blood, nothing to quiet the memory of Mama Zora's warnings from his childhood. Blood drinkers, she'd called them, her voice a low rasp as she stirred a pot of gumbo in her shotgun house. Julien had been 10, sitting cross-legged on her floor, his rosary beads clutched tight as she spoke of creatures that fed on the living, cursed by voodoo and older magic. He'd laughed then, a boy's nervous laugh, but the memory now felt like a noose tightening around his throat. He needed answers, and there was only one person in New Orleans who might have them. Mama Zora lived on the edge of the Treme, in a weathered house painted a fading shade of blue, its porch sagging under the weight of time. The air around it smelled of sage and something sharper, iron, maybe, or blood. Julien climbed the creaking steps, his hand brushing the rosary in his pocket, a reflex he couldn't shake. The door was ajar, a beaded curtain swaying in the breeze, and he caught the faint sound of chanting from within, a low, rhythmic hum that sent a shiver down his spine. "Mama Zora?" he called, his voice steady but soft, respectful. He pushed through the curtain, the beads clicking like bones, and stepped into the dim interior. The air was thick with the scent of incense and candle wax, the walls lined with shelves cluttered with jars of herbs, bones, and things Julien didn't want to name. A small altar stood in the corner, adorned with a statue of Baron Samedi, the Loa of the dead, his top hat tilted at a jaunty angle. Candles flickered around it, their flames casting shadows that danced like spirits on the walls. Mama Zora sat in a rocking chair by the altar, her gnarled hands working a mortar and pestle, grinding something that smelled of earth and decay. She was in her 60s, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes sharp and unblinking as a crow's. Her hair was wrapped in a tignon, the bright red fabric a stark contrast to her dark skin, and a string of beads hung around her neck, clinking softly as she moved. She didn't look up as Julien entered, but her lips curled into a knowing smile. "Julien Dubois," she said, her voice a gravelly drawl that carried the weight of the bayou. "I knew you'd come. The spirit's been whisperin' your name since the moon rose." Julien removed his fedora, holding it in both hands, a gesture of respect he'd learned as a boy. "I need your help, Mama Zora," he said, his Creole accent softening the edges of his words. "There's a girl dead on Bourbon Street. Throat torn, blood gone, and a symbol on her chest, a crescent moon with thorns. Same as the others." Mama Zora's hands stilled, the pestle pausing mid-grind. She looked up at him then, her eyes narrowing, and Julien felt the weight of her gaze like a physical thing. "You seen it before," she said, not a question. "In my stories, when you was a boy. You laughed then. You Logan now?" Julien's jaw tightened. He wanted to say yes, to cling to the logic his Catholic upbringing demanded, but the memory of the girl's body, the bloodless husk, the symbol, made the denial stick in his throat. "I'm not laughing," he said finally. "I need to know what it means." She set the mortar aside and rose, her movements slow but deliberate, like a cat stalking prey. She crossed to the altar, her fingers brushing the statue of Baron Samedi as she muttered a prayer under her breath. Then she turned to Julien, her expression grim. "That symbol ain't just a mark, boy. It's a callan. The blood drinkers use it to claim their kills, to feed a ritual older than this city. They ain't just talking blood, they talking souls, tryin' to break a curse that binds, M." Julien's hand tightened on his hat, his knuckles whitening. "You mean vampires," he said, the word tasting foreign on his tongue bitter. "You're tellin' me vampires are real, and they're killin' in my city?" Mama Zora's laugh was a dry, rasping thing, like leaves skittering across a grave. "You always been a skeptic, Julien, even after that spirit girl showed herself to you in the bayou. But you can't deny what's in front of you no more. They're here, hidin' among the rich folks, the ones with old money and older secrets. That symbol means they're huntin', and they won't stop till they get what they want. Julian's mind reeled, torn between disbelief and the evidence he couldn't ignore. The spirit girl from his past, a memory he'd buried deep, resurfaced, her hollow eyes staring through him, whispering his name. He'd seen her at 15, playing near the water's edge, her form shimmering like a mirage before vanishing with the dawn. That encounter had left him with nightmares for years, a crack in his faith that had never healed. Now, with Mama Zora's words echoing in his ears, that crack widened. "What do they want?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but there was a tremor beneath it, a fear he couldn't name. Mama Zora's eyes darkened, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Immortality beyond what they already got. The ritual needs blood, souls, and a sacrifice, someone tied to the old magic. Someone like you, Julian, with spirits clinging to your past." The words hit like a punch, and Julian took a step back, his hand instinctively brushing the rosary in his pocket. "I'm no part of this," he said, but the denial felt hollow. The spirit girl, the symbol, the killings, it all felt too close, too personal, like a web he'd been tangled in since that day in the bayou. Mama Zora stepped closer, her beads clinking softly. "You can't run from it, boy. The spirits chose you long ago. You want to stop these killings, you gotta face what you've been running from. Start with the LaRue family. Victor LaRue's got more secrets than a snake's got scales, and he's been seen near every killin'. Julian nodded, his mind racing. Victor LaRue, a wealthy Creole businessman, had a reputation for throwing lavish parties at his mansion on Esplanade Avenue, parties that whispered of debauchery and darker things. Julian had crossed paths with him once years ago, during a case involving stolen artifacts. The man had been charming, too charming, with eyes that seemed to see too much. If Mama Zora was right, LaRue might be the key to unraveling this nightmare. "Thank you, Mama Zora," he said, placing his hat back on his head. "I'll look into LaRue." She waved a hand, dismissing him, but her eyes held a warning. "Be careful, Julian. The blood drinkers don't play fair, and they'll smell that spirit on you like hounds on a trail." Julian stepped back through the beaded curtain, the morning light harsh after the dimness of Mama Zora's house. The trume hummed around him, but the air felt heavier now, charged with a danger he couldn't see. He touched the rosary in his pocket, muttering a quick prayer, but the words felt like ash on his tongue. Vampires, rituals, a past that wouldn't let go. New Orleans was a city of masks, and Julian was starting to fear what lay beneath them. As he walked back toward the French Quarter, a plan forming in his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch a little longer, the whispers of the city a little louder. And somewhere in the heart of New Orleans, a killer was waiting,